This is the Dull Man's Podcast, the podcast for dull men
and women
who get excited about dull things.
Welcome to the Dull Man's Podcast. I think this is episode 20 now, which is great. We've reached the big 2-0,
Wow.
which is exciting, isn't it?
Wow.
And joining me here to celebrate this fact, I've got Faye Hatcher. Welcome back to the studio, Faye.
Thank you very much. This is Deech's, dungeon? Deech's
Yeah, well,
dungeon.
one basement to another, isn't it?
Yeah,
this
yeah,
podcast?
and welcome Deech as well.
Yes.
What Faye's referring to there is the fact that we're in a new studio today, in the basement of Deech's house, and it's actually really nice. It's very comfortable.
It's more palatable than our other studio that we have in the basement of a convent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we do seem to specialise in basements, wherever we record.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very nice here. It's warm and well decorated, which you can't say for the other place.
No, this is the basement of an old brewer's master's house about 100 years ago.
So if we hunt around, we might find some barrels of very old beer.
It might be worth drinking it, yeah.
Anyway, it's a very exciting show we've got coming up. Faye, what are you going to talk to us about today?
Today I'm going to talk about the drop-down boxes on online forms and the misuse of them.
Yeah, they can be quite annoying, though, can't they?
Very annoying.
The misuse of them.
The abuse of drop-down boxes. And Deech, what are you going to talk about today?
The woman's timber core.
The woman's timber core. What, singular woman, or was there more than one?
There was thousands.
So women's timber core.
Yeah, the women's timber
Weird
core.
dream that you've had.
Yeah.
Well, in the previous episode where Dave wanted to talk about chopping wood, he did end up having lots of women chopping wood on his tick box.
Yeah. And TikTok, has a lot of women chopping wood. It's weird.
Okay.
Or maybe it's just my personal algorithm. But anyway, sorry, the women's timber core, very quickly before we move on. I've never heard of that.
No, I haven't either.
So it was similar.
He made it up. You made it up, didn't you? You were desperate to talk about something.
It didn't. Yeah, I didn't find it. It found me. On TikTok. No, it was a bit like the Land Girls. So it was an actual thing during World War II, where they needed people to chop down trees.
Oh, good. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that. And I'm going to be talking about Hergé and his famous creation, Tintin, and my obsession with it and the controversy surrounding it. So that is all coming up in the Dull Man's Podcast. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's feedback time, our favourite time. I'm not going to sing a Dick Van Dyke ditty to you, as I did 2 episodes ago, because I got mercilessly taken the piss out of for that.
Jingles are good.
Yeah, just
feedback
leave them to somebody else.
I can't resist it. It's feedback time. It's feedback time. No, I won't. So we got a great bit of feedback. Do you remember Glynis from Solihull, who sent us a voice note quite a few episodes ago? Well, he's been back in touch.
Oh, he stuck with us.
He's
Amazing.
stuck with us.
With us.
And I thought
I pity the fool.
And he had something to say about you, Deech. So would you like to hear that?
Yeah, I best do. Solihull's not too far away from me. I can go and pay him a visit.
Hello, me it is again with a comment about beginning of episode 19. In the chit chat you have before the show proper starts, somebody mentioned that Deech was the 800th most popular comedian in the world. Well, I, for one, could not name 799 better comedians than Deech, and I think he's therefore underrating himself. He must be better than 800th.
So there's a compliment for you, Deech.
Well, he's a man of good taste. He's a man of intellect.
Sorry, what are you basing that on?
well, he's fathomed what I was trying to sort of coax out of our listeners, that perhaps I am better than, I was trying to remain humble, but it was difficult. And so I'm glad that my fans, let's call them Deech bags.
Should we just say fan for now?
My Deech bags, as I think they want to be called, are now slowly coming out of the woodwork and giving me some support.
And saying he is better than the 800th.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, should we upgrade you here on the show and say 797?
No, I think we should embrace what Glyn has said as fact that I am actually the best comedian on the planet.
That isn't what he said.
No, he didn't say that.
He said he didn't know 799 comedians that were better than you. He might have known 798 that were better, but he didn't know 799.
Well, that's a okay. Well, this is open to interpretation, is it not? The way I'm interpreting it is that the town of Solihull has awarded me best comedian on the planet. That's how I'm taking this.
I suspect Glynis may send us another voice.
I'd like to think that the whole of the West Midlands is now putting me as one of the finest stand-up comedians and joke tellers around, living or dead.
Really, that's a bold claim.
The problem is you've invested in loads of merch now, stating that you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Far down the ranking, so you don't really want anything to change.
I don't want many awards, but if a park somewhere could be named after me, I think that's a nice compromise.
Yeah, perhaps you could
Hyde Park.
You could
be Deech Park.
You could say I am number one comedian, and then in brackets, in this cul-de-sac where I happen to live, or something like that. But keep that very small print. So put that on the T-shirt.
Yeah, well, so in the small print. Well, some might even say that I'm not even the funniest person in my house.
Yeah, it was like when they asked if asked one of the Beatles if Ringo was the best drummer in the world, and they said he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
Yeah, brutal takedown.
Absolutely horrible, wasn't it? All right, brilliant. Thank you, Glyn, for sending that brilliant bit of feedback.
Keep them coming.
And we had this email in as well from a lady called Pip, and she's a listener, and obviously, otherwise she wouldn't have written in. And she says that she wanted to say something about jelly babies because she heard our episode about jelly babies.
Great episode.
A couple of episodes ago, and she had a comment. She says, as someone who is rarely without an emergency pack of jelly babies, I was very nearly interested in your last podcast. I think she means the one before last. So eventually got round to listening to it. She says she was shocked by the dark history that you revealed, Deech.
Yes.
Mistakes, unclaimed giant babies, etc. And it was almost the last straw when I learned that their slightly dusty appearance is down to starch and not sugar. However, she said she was disappointed you didn't mention the great man to whom we owe the sugary miracle that is the jelly baby. It was Herr Steinbeck who made the original mistake with the teddy bear mould all those years ago. So I think he deserves a sticky blue plaque somewhere. Any ideas where this should go? So Herr Steinbeck.
Herr Steinbeck. Well, they were invented in Burnley, I believe. So that's where the blue plaque should go.
Right.
Inventor of the jelly baby.
But Herr Steinbeck doesn't sound like he's from Burnley.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, if he's
sounds like a barber shop in Germany.
If he's the one that got the mould wrong, but anyway, that was a nice comment from Pip.
Yeah,
obviously enjoyed your piece about jelly.
I'm on a roll.
Wow,
look at that.
His head is getting.
She's another Deech bag.
Yeah, 2 out of 2.
Yeah,
amazing. So now let's get on with the business of the podcast. And shall we start, Faye, with your discussion about drop-down boxes on online forms? I'm feeling tired already just saying the title.
I can't believe I'm talking about this, actually. But,
I
mean,
it's so you. I've got to say, as a frustration, it is so you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that we fill in information online now, it's over the years, it's so much easier, isn't it, and quicker. That's the point. And everything's designed and set up to just make the experience quicker. Supposedly. And I'm forever filling in forms online, whether it's for myself or booking to go to soft play with my daughter, or swimming lessons, or, I don't know, air hop was the most recent experience. Air hop, it's in Bristol, loads of trampolines.
Oh, okay.
And
you've got to fill in an online form for them to allow you.
Yeah, exactly. And how old is everybody? And so there's the usual stuff, your name and your title. And I love looking at the options for titles, so Miss, Mr, Ms, Mrs, Lord,
Doctor,
Baroness.
They're on there, aren't they?
They're all on there.
Do you choose a different one every time?
Sometimes. Somewhere I am Baroness Faye Hatch.
I knew it.
So this is what I'm talking about, the misuse of these drop-down boxes. It's like, well, I mean, why do we need to know whether somebody's a Baroness or not? And
Yeah.
am I hoping that I'll get a different experience at soft play if I say I'm a Baroness?
Yeah, I suppose
After
if there was,
you, Baroness.
I am now trying to work out why they would want to know that. It might be useful that they could look up to see if there was a doctor there. If there's an injury that you get at air
Interesting.
Hop,
Hadn't thought
let's
about
have a look.
that.
Oh, we've got a doctor.
Got the doctor in the house.
Is there a baroness in the house? We've had an earl come up who's now complaining. We need to match them at their equal level.
Really good point.
Do you think if somebody was injured and they needed the doctor, they wouldn't, and they knew that Faye was in the house and she dropped down and said doctor, they wouldn't say, is there a doctor in the house? They would say, could the doctor come forward,
Yes.
please? Because we know
you're here.
And then all that's happened is you've accidentally clicked doctor instead of Mrs.
Yes.
So it was just an accident. You hadn't even noticed. Then you've got to pretend
to
that
be a
you
doctor.
you can put someone's shoulder back in.
This is like,
And now everyone's
Stand
looking
back,
at you.
everybody.
The parents are looking at you. There's some child there.
No
their
pressure.
arms hanging off.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, but you're in too deep now. You've
Yeah.
gone too far because you've accepted their free cup of. They come and help us, and you'll get a
Yes.
free cup of coffee, and you've accepted that. I don't know if that's how it would work.
Yeah, but imagine the embarrassment if there was another doctor who was actually a real doctor.
Yeah.
But
and
they'd
they,
actually-
and they would let us, oh no, you handle it because you got here first.
no, honestly, you.
Yeah, I don't want to tread on your toes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was really hoping for a day off today
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
just forgetting everything about work. But so that's quite fun, and you can be on online forms for quite a long time. The other thing that really amuses me is putting in your date of birth. Again, why do they need to know that? I know they need to know that for children, perhaps, or working out how much the whole experience is going to cost. Now, I have found myself many times now on the big drop-down box going way
Are you
past
getting lower and lower?
way past my date of birth. And yeah, you have to kind of just keep going like, yeah, there's my date of birth, the year of my birth,
But
1976. However, I have now started, I've been doing this for a few years now, going beyond 1976 and going, okay, are they seriously thinking that somebody at the age of 100, so 1925, is going to go to a soft play experience? So now I'm like setting myself a challenge each time. So
Okay.
it's Skittles. I'm booking some Skittles. Oh my gosh, they've got 1920 here. So now I'm imagining granny, granddad, great grandfather booking to play Skittles at the age of like 110 or whatever. So, but this is my new thing. This is my new pastime. Whenever I'm filling in a form now, I always see how far.
But it's all about data collection. That's what you're
guess
asking.
so.
Why do they need you?
Yeah.
But companies are obsessed about data collection now because data is considered the key to marketing and pushing you forward and knowing who your customers are and marketing to the right people and all that. So they collect all this tons and tons of data, and then very clever people called data scientists do stuff with it. And that's an actual profession. I've made some podcasts with some data scientists.
Wow.
Yeah. They're actually.
I'm impressed.
They're really. It's a really surprisingly interesting subject. Actually, it sounds quite very dry, even drier than a Dull Man's podcast. But in fact, it's very interesting. But the other thing about those drop down menus that I was thinking is that sometimes the thing that you want to put isn't there.
Yes.
And you think, oh, well, I'll type something in. But
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah.
It won't let you type your own thing in. You've got to have
Yeah.
one of their choices.
Yes.
And that I find really irritating.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they're forcing you into a corner.
They're forcing you to be a doctor or a baron or a baron or a baroness in your
Or somebody really, really, really old.
But I'm neither of those things.
I'm the king.
Yeah. Why isn't airline pilot on there? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I think the profession option is tricky because I have so many, I wear so many hats now, and how do I categorise that in one
you are
thing?
Well, we already established that you're
Miss
Miss
Rabbit.
Rabbit.
Yeah,
So-
there isn't a Miss Rabbit
Is there not a Miss Rabbit
option. No, there isn't.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the most frustrating.
And for any
one.
listener that doesn't understand that, you've got two choices. You can either listen
Yeah.
to a previous episode where we explain that, or you can watch Peppa Pig, and it will become
choice is yours.
immediately obvious
Yeah.
why Faye is Miss Rabbit.
What about the American formatting of the date? I've been caught out.
Yes.
Yeah, so the month comes first and then
Yeah.
the day.
As if they
That's
haven't-
really
yeah.
bloody annoying, isn't
Yes.
it? But there's nothing there to say this is the American format of putting the date in. It's just like assuming that you know. It's like, I don't bloody know.
Yeah, can I say that happens on Spotify when we're uploading these podcasts and we're scheduling the podcast?
Bloody hell,
It's the
Spotify.
American formatting. So, so you have to be a little careful, or you schedule your podcast to come out in 3 months' time by accident,
Yes.
rather than on Monday. So,
I think there just should be a little notice there saying this is what.
well, I suppose their argument is,
Signing
well,
up to.
most of our listeners, or most of our users are
Right.
American or whatever.
Okay,
or
fair enough.
I don't know.
But Americans are completely bamboozled as to why we do this. Completely, it's like, why do you do it the wrong way round? It's like, but it's not.
What
it's
does the rest of the world do, though?
I don't know. I think they do it our way.
Yeah, I think
because
Americans are the. odd
Yeah,
ones out.
yes. But it makes logical sense that you have the date before the month because you're getting larger in size of
Yeah.
time thing.
So if you're saying the 5th of May,
Okay,
as
Brian
opposed
Cox.
to, it is, you're right, it is logical,
Brian
because the
Cox.
5th of May, the 5th day of May, as opposed to May 5th,
Yes.
because May 5th could be the 5th version of the month of May, that you're talking about, which is obviously really weird.
I would agree that what you just said is really weird. I agree with you there,
It
Dave.
made sense in my head. It just didn't sound so good when it came out of my mouth.
That's the first time that's happened, is it? Or
Yeah, it could be the 5th May of
Of the millennium.
the millennium. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
don't
See, Deech?
Yeah, I
See,
got
it did
it.
make sense.
Yeah.
They understood me.
Yeah.
She did. Yeah. She helped me understand it.
She's a good teacher.
So we're talking about comic strips next, and Hergé and Tintin is an absolute passion of yours, isn't it, Dave?
It is, and not just any old comic strip. These, to me, are the definitive comic strips. I've been into Tintin ever since I was a kid. I kind of came across a French version of a book called The Black Island, L'Île Noire, I think that is in French, and it was at my aunt's house. She was French, and I read this book, even though I didn't understand a word of it. I kind of looked at the pictures,
the pictures.
and I loved the pictures. I just really loved them. And then I think my mum found me the English translation of it, and got it for me, and I was completely hooked then. And then I discovered, to my delight, that there were loads of these books. It wasn't just this one book. And so gradually I started collecting them through my childhood and teens. And I think probably by the time I was sort of 16 or 17, I had them all, and I was, and I knew them all inside out. I'd read them all 55 times. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about it, because I sort of often wondered why I'm so obsessed with this. And it kind of went into my adulthood as well. I'd sort of, and I've still got all the books. I'd never throw them away or give them away. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. So it was, the Tintin books were invented by a guy called Hergé. That was his nickname, Hergé, which was his real name was Georges Remy. He was Belgian. Hergé is the French pronunciation of his initials. And the initials are reversed, by the way. It's, instead of being GR, it's RG, and that in French is Hergé. So he became very famous in the sort of 20s and 30s because he was a Belgian comic strip artist, and he created these Adventures of Tintin as a sort of series, of kind of weekly thing, or however often the paper came out. And he became one of the most popular comics in Europe.
For children at that point?
Yes, it was. Yeah, but it's quite interesting when you start to look into it. And he did other characters as well: Quick and Floop, and Joe and Zetty, and Jocko.
Yes, I remember that.
Jocko was a monkey, actually. But in case anybody's interested, and you will be as an artist, Faye, his works were executed in his distinctive ligne claire drawing style. I don't know what that means.
Ligne is line.
Yeah, so Claire could be clear. I don't know. Clear lines. I don't know. Distinctive line. Anyway, that's the style apparently. But he did I better let's cover the controversy, okay? Because it's important. A lot of people think he's a slightly dodgy character, Hergé. and there is some evidence on that. So he worked for a conservative Catholic newspaper originally called Le 20e siècle, and The Adventures of Tintin, they were created in 1929.
Oh, wow.
And the editor asked him to do a story about this, for children. So he came up with this boy reporter called Tintin and his dog Snowy, and they went on these, and they were going to go on these adventures all over the world. And Hergé wanted him to go to America. He thought that'd be interesting, but the editor of this Catholic newspaper said, no, you've got to make him go to Russia, because we want to do a bit of an anti-Russian thing.
Okay.
So it was done as propaganda for children. So Tintin and the Land of the Soviets, which became that first story, if you look at it, it is really, it's quite sort of clumsy,
right?
Certainly of its time.
Yeah,
if that's what you're going to say.
Yeah.
And then he did another one called Tintin in the Congo. And Belgium, bear in mind, was a sort of imperial owner of the Congo at that time, and so that was really, and it really, what you look at it now and it's racist. It's racist. It's horrible. At the time, nobody batted an eyeyelid.
That wouldn't have been the only racist thing at that point.
No,
in
but
print or anything like that.
And his depictions of the local people were not. They weren't unkind in the sense of being nasty about them, but they were very simplified and made them seem stupid and in need of the white man to look after them and that sort of thing. So fairly typical of the time, I suspect.
It probably wasn't even propaganda at that point. It was just what they thought.
Well, I think it was trying to, the propaganda element was trying to say, well, it's fine that Belgium's in charge of the Congo. That's quite normal, and that was sort of... So and then finally he did get to do his Tintin in America, and that was quite a different book, because then he was very pro the working class in America and anti the gangsters and big business and that sort of thing, and so that was sort of propaganda as well. But it wasn't. But it was a different sort of propaganda. It was sort of it was because he was working for a right wing magazine, but it was almost left wing what he was talking about there. So it's very, very interesting. So he was a sort of, there were contradictions there, and I don't think he was a very political figure himself. He just loved telling stories, and he was very good at drawing. So, but then the controversy, I'm afraid, does get slightly worse, because then, of course, the war came. The Second World War arrived, and the Nazis took over Belgium, and he started working for a magazine. I think it was called Le Soir or something like that, a newspaper, and that's okay, except Le Soir was controlled by the Nazis. So he was doing his comic book strips and stuff like that, which weren't, I don't think they weren't pro-Nazi or anything like that. They were just the Adventures of Tintin, but they were in a newspaper that was controlled by the Nazis. And after the war, a lot of the journalists and people that worked on those sorts of things that were controlled by the Nazis were accused of collaboration. And some of them were jailed. Some of them, got into real trouble. Hergé himself, they did investigate him, but no charges were brought. Mm-hmm. I think they felt it would be a bit ridiculous bringing charges against a cartoon creator, but so he wasn't charged with it. But it did hang over him for a long time, and he found it difficult to get work after the war and that sort of thing. But eventually he did sort of carry on with it, and then the Adventures of Tintin blossomed into this huge series of books. There were 24 books eventually. The last one was unfinished. And they were massively popular. They were translated into hundreds of different languages. And as I say, people, kids like me were getting hold of them and absolutely loving Tintin, because he was this fantastic boy reporter with his dog, and he would travel the world. You go all over the place. So literally no country in the world was not visited by Tintin solving some crime and defeating some horrible bloke. And there were some great recurring characters in it, like Thompson and Thompson, the Thompson twins. Band named after them, obviously. They were introduced in a book called Cigars of the Pharaohs, and they were supposed to be twins, but oddly their surnames were spelt differently. One was with a P and one was without. And that always puzzled me as a kid. I thought, but if they're twins, surely they'd have the same surname. But anyway,
you're the only person in the world who's ever noticed that.
Yeah.
And unless it was their first names. That's the only...
Thompson and Thompson. Yeah, I never thought of that.
That's the only... Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions with my journalist hat on.
Oh, good.
Is Tintin the same person as Jimmy Somerville?
Well, if Jimmy Somerville is the same person, he must have got the idea from Tintin.
Fair
because
enough.
He obviously came a lot later.
And here's my second question. Is Tintin anything to do with Asterix?
No, they're completely separate, and they
Same though, same sort of illustration.
They both come from that Gallic animated tradition. It's true, but and there's a lot of Asterix fans. Will say, "Oh, Asterix is the best," and a lot of Tintin fans will say, "No,
okay, I didn't realise."
So,
Yeah,
was it like Star Wars, Star Trek, that kind of
exactly
kicks off.
Yeah, and
off at the Comic-Con.
I've read quite a few Asterix books, and I enjoyed them, but to me, they're very different. They're almost not comparable.
They're set in not Roman times, but
they are set in Roman times. Yeah, and it's the Gauls and all that sort of thing.
I remember reading Tintin and Asterix when I was a kid, and I just didn't get the sense of humour.
Yeah,
was it just a little bit too grown up for me?
I think there's more obvious humour in Asterix. There's sort of a lot of slapstick. From my memory of Asterix, whereas Tintin is more serious. There is humour in it, but it's he's this boy reporter. He's solving crimes. He's going after baddies. And he's so it's more like that appealed to me as a teenage boy. I just loved the adventure. So I wasn't reading it for the humour. Although there definitely is humour. I mean, Captain Haddock, his famous long-term companion, is a very, very funny character, and he's always getting it wrong. And the Thompson twins, which I just mentioned, the detectives, they are clumsy idiots, and they stumble across the solution by accident most of the time. And so there definitely is a lot of humour in it. So there we are. Tintin, I would recommend it, though, despite the controversy. Introduce your children to Tintin. Maybe the later books.
Yeah.
So, Deech, you're going to talk to us today about a thing that Faye and I have definitely never heard of called the Women's Timber Corps.
Yes.
What is it? What's it all about?
Well, just a few episodes back, you were talking about your love for chopping wood and who doesn't love chopping wood. So one of my passions is sort of modern history in the war. And during the war, there were the land girls, and I think a lot of people have heard of the land girls and tilling the land and doing sort of farming jobs. But there was also something a lot less known, which was the Women's Timber Corps. Because when war broke out, we as a nation were importing nearly 100% of our timber from abroad. I think it's about like 97%. And that had to stop because they would just get U-boated. And the men who would do the job, they were obviously going to be conscripted to go to war. So they thought about, first of all, using prisoners to chop down trees, and that didn't work out. So they employed women to do the job, and they ended up having hundreds, almost about 1,000 women chopping down trees, and they set up the Women's Timber Corps with all the background jobs, the sawmills and that. I think there was about 5,000 ladies in total doing this from 1939 up until 1946. And they had a nickname. Guess what that nickname might be? Bearing in mind, a lumberjack is what you call a male.
Lumberjohn?
Very close. A lumberjill.
Oh.
They were called the lumberjills. Wow. And they were great, absolutely fantastic ladies because they had, as you would expect, a lot of prejudice against them. They wouldn't be able to do the job, right? And what annoys me when I read about this is that it wasn't just sort of, well, they're not going to be able to do the job, sympathise with them and sort of help them out. They made it worse for them. They wouldn't put them in like the army billets. They slept in sheds. They had to do the work in blizzards. They basically had to prove themselves, and that they
work 3 times as hard as a man would have to.
They would have to, and the chances are a man of that age probably would have done manual work and probably would have had the strength to do it, because this is back-breaking work. They wouldn't have had chainsaws. They were chopping down trees with felling axes. They were chopping down trees with like a two-handed saw, one person at each end. The kit they had was, not. They wouldn't have had a Gore-Tex jacket, put it like that. Yeah. They would have just been soaking wet, going out in blizzards, and they had to put up with all these sort of prejudice, and they worked really hard, and they were completely unrecognised. At the end of the war, they had to give all their uniforms back. They had berets as well, these green berets, during their time.
And where did this happen? I mean, where were the forests that they were
So
chopping the wood down? Was it all over the place? Or?
So there were in Yorkshire there were a lot. Scotland in the Highlands there were a heck of a lot, and they had no running water up there. This was all they're just the women. They don't need that. So in Scotland they had them in Yorkshire, basically all over wherever there were sort of forests, and they would replant as well.
Yeah. And you found us a clip, haven't you?
Yes.
Shall we play that?
Some girls are jolly good fellas. That seems strange. Take a good look at these sturdy lumberjills on their way to fill their daily bag of forest giants, somewhere in Scotland. After the felling, the trimming or cleaning off as it's called. Then the trunks are sawn into short lengths for easier handling. Whoever would have thought that among these sturdy log rollers are a nurse, shop assistant, usherette, teacher, and so on. A mixed company, but all jolly good fellows.
Jolly good fellows.
Well, there you go. Wasn't that fun?
Gordon Brown in 2007 awarded all of them a medal. And I think that would have meant a lot to all of them, really, that they finally got recognised.
Well, make up for that the narration on that part.
Yeah,
a bit,
blimey.
Dobbin and Dorothy.
I've got like a quote from this lady called Rosalind Elder. Said, a young Rosalind volunteered to be a horsewoman, which involved the added duties of caring for the horses and the dangerous job of attaching chains to fallen logs and to the horses without getting entangled. And she said, I was a bit small and I was quick and agile, so I was good at it. And she sort of spoke about how it was so hard in these sort of billets and stuff, and living in the sheds. She said, but the good thing was, she said, the men, there were 4 men to every girl, and we had plenty of dates.
Now we're going to
Rosalind.
Go on, Rosalind. The necessity for wood was essential in those times, mainly actually for mining coal, because coal was needed back then.
They needed
more
pit
so.
props.
And they needed pit props, and they needed and also sleepers for trains, and sort of boats and planes were all made of wood and things like that.
Well, thank you for listening to this fantastic episode of the Dolmans podcast. Thank you, Faye, for your lovely drop-down menus.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and well, just appealing to all of our listeners, just have some fun when you're next on an online form.
You're telling them to be fraudulent.
Yeah. It's fine.
All right, fair enough. And Deech, thank you very much for your wood chopping as well, your female wood chopping. That obviously appealed to me a great deal.
Of course, I tried my hardest.
It's been another fine episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please tell your friends, please follow us, and don't forget to tune in for the next episode of the Dolmans podcast.
And all I'm doing is scrolling down. I'm like seeing all these
It's a waste of
youngsters,
time, isn't it?
even though they're not actually there. I'm like, oh yeah, 2001, those bloody millennials, they can off.